What the fuck?
I remember what the mechanism was.
Yeah, so
How do you not know the mechanism of which your number one selling product, the one you rave about every day, the number one, in your words, number one most powerful whole body food, and you don't know the mechanism of which it helps weight loss, but it's the study that you put in the front of your video. Tablespoons of, what the fuck? So what is all this mumbo jumbo about the olive oil needs to be cold pressed, put in a UV bottle, it needs to be sniffed by a monkey's butt? Like, what are I don't know what else to say other than olive oil is just completely misleading the way it's been claimed online, and it's honestly just disappointing. By the way, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a clinical researcher, I'm not an influencer. I'm an average Joe just like you that wants to get to the bottom of the truth. I want to know, should I spend the money and time and resources to use or buy this product in order to get a benefit better than the cost or time commitment to use that product? As I'm watching these videos, particularly with olive oil, I'm relying on the influencer that typically has skin in the game, all of these secondary resources, and I was tired of it. Finally decided I want to roll up my sleeves. I want to read the studies for myself and figure out, is this actually useful and effective in a clinical trial? And that's what I did today. In my opinion, extra virgin olive oil's impact on overall health and weight loss is severely overstated online. It's particularly in the situation of an individual with an already clean diet that's deciding, hey, do I need to add 1 to 4 more tablespoons, 500 extra calories to my diet if I'm already eating a clean diet in order to get that marginal difference of health benefits? The claims made by some of these influencers, as you'll see in this video, have minimal to zero evidence to support it, even the claims in their own video. I was tired of taking advice from online influencers and not actually reading the data for myself. For the first time ever, I actually read a clinical trial yesterday. And so I'm going to show you how I actually researched this and what my conclusion came to. Before I show you how I researched this live, I'm going to show you the current claims about olive oil.
It's interesting.
Yeah, peppery and smooth. If you look at the evidence we just shared about what this does, it's unbelievable in the ways it improves health and wellness. It's better than Ozempic.
Really?
And so, for example, there's a study where people lost 5.2 pounds taking an EVOO, consuming EVOO for 9 weeks.
In addition to what they're currently eating.
Yeah, see if I can slow down my speed of aging and reverse it. The question I get most frequently is, give me the one thing I can do in my life, because you're busy, you have stuff going on, and you don't have the team to do all this complexity. So I'm going to tell you, it may surprise you, it's better than all and our cold plunges, saunas, and your favorite podcast. It's that good. It's extra virgin olive oil.
So, I am not to dispute its utility. I think it's, a no-brainer if people can handle the calorie burden without it resulting in overeating as a whole. I guess my curiosity is in the mechanism by which it's accomplishing the weight loss. Like, is it such that it's, I couldn't find the study, by the way, so I was hoping you could speak to it, did they find that it enhanced some metabolic output, or was it more that they perceived they were eating the same diet, but in reality it was attenuating hunger signaling dramatically, and they were portion controlling just by indirect subconscious behaviors?
I don't know. We can pull it up.
Okay.
Let's pull it up.
Sure.
Let me see if I can find it.
What the fuck?
I remember what the mechanism was.
Yeah, so
How do you not know the mechanism of which your number one selling product, the one you rave about every day, the number one, in your words, number one most powerful whole body food, and you don't know the mechanism of which it helps weight loss, but it's the study that you put in the front of your video? Man, I really, really like Bryan, and I really, really like what he's doing, and I literally bought 2 of these bottles of olive oil. It's just frustrating. Like, this is your bread and butter product, and you don't even understand the mechanism of which it works, and you can't substantiate the claims that you make for weight loss. I mean, the weight loss part, I don't even care. Like, let's not, at the end of the day, it's thermodynamics, calories in, calories out. We get it. Does it increase metabolism? Who knows? Probably not. If you were to point out a study that could show that, that'd be phenomenal. But let's just assume it doesn't. Does it have properties that improve health? We don't even know that.
Going what you said, 9 weeks, 5.2 pounds, EVOO, I can find it easily. But I would think by law of thermodynamics, there's some sort of proportional change in the way people are eating the other stuff to accommodate the olive oil, and perhaps there's some upregulation in health processes that helps to some extent. 5.2 pounds in 9 weeks is pretty solid for adding calories if it was actually on top of the current diet.
5.2 pounds in 9 weeks is 1.7 pounds per week. Dude, that's phenomenal. So you're telling me 2 parties eating the same amount of calories with another party eating an additional 500 calories or so of olive oil on top of that has produced so much of a marginal difference in metabolism that they are losing on top of the gain in calories 1.7 pounds per week. Oh,
See, that's the best fat burner on the planet.
Yeah.
literally.
You know, is it true, really comparable to Ozempic? You know, like I'm trying to, I'm not doing a straight comparison, trying to really accomplish an objective. Okay, yeah, here we go.
I mean, you put the study on the front thumbnail of your video, and man, this is why I need to do the research for myself now. It's just disappointing. It's frustrating.
So you said 15% of your diet is comprised by olive oil calories?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's get into how I actually researched this.
See if I can slow down my speed of aging and reverse it. The question I get most frequently is, give me the one thing I can do in my life, because you're busy, you have stuff going on, and you don't have the team to do all this complexity. So I'm going to tell you, and based up with EVOO is protective against that damage. These studies show improvements in weight management.
Okay, first study here, the effect of high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil on blood pressure and arterial stiffness in healthy Australian adults. So we're going to go ahead and pull this one up. So I'm going to download this file and I'm going to drag it over into ChatGPT. And then I have a prompt that I'm using now that I developed yesterday that I'm going to paste into here. And basically what I'm telling it is analyze the attached research paper. I want to identify the study type. Was it randomized clinical trial? The question that we're trying to establish in plain English. I want to summarize the exposure comparison groups, who was the placebo versus the group that got the actual dosages, explain the primary outcome. I want to know like the report effective sizes, any bias, risks, limitations that the ChatGPT analyzes, conflicts of interest with the study. Randomized clinical trials are going to be your best source of clinical trial information, only of which a meta-analysis, which is analyzing multiple randomized clinical trials, would be better than that. So your highest form of evidence is going to be your randomized clinical trial, which as an example is when they take participants and they randomly assign them to the different groups, whether it's the control group or the actual group getting the dosage or medicine. And they have no idea. A double blind would be if they have no idea they're getting the drug and the researcher has no idea who is getting the drug. And that is honestly a very strong study, the randomized clinical trial plus the double blind. And in the case of the meta-analysis, they're taking multiple randomized clinical trials and analyzing it across a larger time span, a larger sample size. So it's even stronger data. And then I have ChatGPT end with a practical verdict. And I'm going to put this prompt in the description of the video so you can use this as well. I tell it to use simple language, don't overstate findings. And so let's see what it generates here from the research that I downloaded. That was a direct link to the one Bryan Johnson had put on his video. Okay, so in this example, the study type was double blind, randomized, and controlled. That's fantastic. So this one was actually good because it was a crossover randomized clinical trial, meaning each participant tried both oils. So there was a period of 3 weeks of which they tried the olive oil, the high polyphenol, and then they took a break, and then a 2-week break, and then they tried the low polyphenol olive oil. So by the way, this trial is not comparing someone not taking any olive oil to someone taking olive oil. It's comparing someone taking high polyphenol olive oil to low polyphenol. So this is specifically arguing, does high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil lower blood pressure or improve arterial stiffness more than low polyphenol olive oil? So we're comparing high polyphenol to low polyphenol, which he indicates is very important with his blueprint extra virgin olive oil. So in terms of the sample size, 50 adults randomized, only 43, so 7 didn't complete the study, 43 completed, 66% female, generally healthy, no like out of the ordinary. Okay, so key results. The most important point, high polyphenol olive oil improved systolic blood pressure from its own baseline, but it did not beat the low polyphenol control oil in the direct between group comparison. In terms of the arterial stiffness, none of the measures improved. So there was no significant difference. Participants gained a small amount of weight because they're adding about 4 tablespoons of, what the fuck? This is what I'm saying, and this is on your video. Okay, next study.
Management, blood pressure, blood sugar.
Okay, here's the next one. Consumption of extra virgin olive oil improves body composition and blood pressure in women with excess body fat. Aha, this was the one he was talking about with the weight loss of 5.2 pounds. Let's dig into this one. So again, I'm going to search this here on Google. I'm going to pull up the NIH via PubMed, which is going to be your clinical study here. And in this scenario, it looks like if I try to go to the full text link, it actually blocks me. So unfortunately, if you go the illegal route through Sci-Hub, it is illegal, so I do not recommend that. I recommend purchasing that. And so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, now that we have our file, I'm going to go ahead and drag this into ChatGPT, and I'm going to paste my prompt that we looked at before. Hit enter. Okay, what is this study trying to determine? Does adding 25 milliliters a day of extra virgin olive oil to a calorie-restricted diet improve body fat, weight, blood pressure, and metabolic markers more than adding 25 milliliters a day of soybean oil? So this was not a no olive oil to olive oil comparison. This was an extra virgin olive oil comparison to soybean oil. Pretty interesting study. I like the premise. Now, in terms of the study type, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, looks pretty strong. Remember, this is all women. So women were randomized to either soybean oil control or extra virgin olive oil for 9 weeks. So far, study's looking great. Okay, now in terms of sample size, we've got 41 women, 20 in the soybean category, 21 in the extra virgin olive oil category. Women aged about 27 with BMI between this range and high body fat around 46.8. So I like that they're looking at specific parameters of the population. Women around this age, BMI and body fat. Okay, now let's see the numerical differences. So in terms of total body fat, when you look at the differences, there was a moderate benefit. I also like to ask to interpret the numerical results for me because oftentimes ChatGPT can give a better summary. So the paper is actually one of the stronger olive oil randomized clinical trials because it reports the actual difference between the groups, not just whether something was statistically significant. So the total body fat, most important result, just to clarify, these women were put on a calorie deficit. So my understanding is that these women were actually put on a calorie deficit regardless. So in the study, each participant was intentionally put on a calorie deficit, one of the most important aspects of interpreting this study. So this wasn't like they were doing their normal diet, not losing any weight, and then they added olive oil on top of that. Both groups were prescribed an energy-restricted diet of approximately 2,090 kJ per day, which is about a negative 500 caloric restriction deficit per day. The diets were designed to have the same calorie target and similar macronutrient distribution. The only planned difference was the type of oil they consumed. 25 milliliters soybean, 25 milliliter extra virgin olive oil. So at the premise, we already have a 500 calorie deficit from each participant. Now, how do we measure that deficit? Well, supposedly they measured each person's energy expenditure, specifically custom to them, and removed 500 calories from that to get to the calories they needed to cut. Now, is that a perfect science? And that can definitely result in some variations, but what do we see from the data? So the outcome, that weight loss of soybean oil was 1.7 kilograms, 1.3 kilograms body fat loss, and extra virgin olive oil was 2.7 versus 2.4. So there was a difference with extra virgin olive oil. So the answer from the study was that the extra virgin olive oil group lost about 1.05 kilograms more, but this was not statistically significant. The body fat loss, in terms of the bottom line, the study does not show that olive oil causes weight loss on its own. Shows that within the context of a calorie-restricted diet, replacing soybean oil with extra virgin olive oil was associated with greater body fat loss over 9 weeks. Much narrower and more accurate conclusion than saying olive oil burns fat. Of course, let's not forget the law of thermodynamics. We need to reduce our calorie count. We need to be consuming less than we are burning. So obviously with the deficit of 500 between each, that makes sense that both would obviously lose weight. Now, is it statistically significant that the extra virgin olive oil group lost more weight? According to ChatGPT, no. In terms of the body fat loss, yes. So perhaps there is some great mechanism for body fat loss now because what was the sample size though? 41 women. So, I mean, you're talking about 21 women versus 20 women on the other side. I mean, honestly, it's not enough data. It's not enough participants to really say that because when they're calculating the energy expenditure, it can be easily misinterpreted. And it just so happens that one group lost more body fat or weight than the other. I just don't think it's strong enough that olive oil itself increases weight loss on top of an existing diet. That's just la la land. But if we were to take a deficit and include olive oil instead of soybean oil, does it benefit? Maybe a little, but the claims that are made are just outrageous. Okay, on to the next study. Okay, I saved the best study for last. So this is called the PREDIMED This was the most influential study around the Mediterranean diet and olive oil. They had 7,447 participants. This was published in New. So this is the study here: primary prevention of cardiovascular disease with a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil or nuts. So this one was really fascinating. I'm going to download this in PDF. Now that I've got the PDF, I'm going to go ahead and upload it into ChatGPT and enter my prompt. Okay, so this was a parallel group randomized clinical trial. Not sure what parallel group means necessarily, but it is an RCT. So the question was, does a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil or nuts reduce major cardiovascular events compared with advice to follow a reduced fat diet? So remember, this is one of the most influential studies on olive oil / Mediterranean diet. Now the three groups, this is interesting because the first group was the Mediterranean diet plus extra virgin olive oil, 4 tablespoons a day. The second group was Mediterranean diet plus nuts, a day of mixed nuts. In the control group, they were advised to just reduce their dietary fat. So hey, just eat better, essentially. No calorie restriction, no exercise programs were prescribed. 7,447 adults in Spain from 55 to 80, so an older population at high cardiovascular risk. Okay, so not your typical population, but high cardiovascular risk and older. About 57% were women. Now, how did they actually measure this? A major cardiovascular event like a heart attack, stroke, or death from cardiovascular causes would essentially flag a data point. And so from this chart here, it's a little hard to interpret. So I like to ask it, please summarize the data and interpret. So it looks like for the 3 different groups we have here, the number of events, which could be like the bad cardiovascular events, heart attack, etc., was at 3.8% for the extra virgin olive oil Mediterranean group, 3.4%, so actually a little bit less for the Mediterranean plus nuts, and for the control group with low fat advice, 4.4%, a little bit higher than both. That being the highest 5-year risk for the Mediterranean nuts and the lowest for the extra virgin olive oil group had a 31% lower. Now here's the interpretation. The extra virgin olive oil group had a 31% lower risk of major cardiovascular events versus the control group. Now that's not what I'm after. What I want to know is, how did the Mediterranean and extra virgin olive oil group compare to the Mediterranean plus nuts? Because what we're trying to accomplish is, how much of an impact does the extra virgin olive oil make? Of course, if we switch to a Mediterranean diet, we're going to see a massive impact. So the control group comparing to Mediterranean in any context without extra virgin olive oil, without nuts, is going to have a massive difference. I want to know specifically, how much did the extra virgin olive oil have a marginal difference compared to something like nuts, for example? That's the question I want to know. Interestingly, they were remarkably similar. One was not clearly better than the other. So your 2 columns here, the extra virgin olive oil group, the nuts group, major cardiovascular, they actually had more major cardiovascular events in the extra virgin olive oil group, 96 compared to 83 in the nuts group. And let's see, about the same 95% confidence interval. I'm not an expert in statistics, so I'm not sure what that means particularly, but basically what that's saying is that there was a low probability that could have happened by pure luck. Okay, those numbers are so close that you cannot conclude extra virgin olive oil is better than nuts or vice versa. So your ChatGPT's interpretation, my takeaway isn't olive oil is better than nuts. It's both Mediterranean diet patterns worked and produced near identical reduction in major cardiovascular events. Of course, if you go from a crappy diet to now eating clean food, regardless if you take the olive oil, nuts, whatever it is, you're going to benefit. So what is all this mumbo jumbo about the olive oil needs to be cold pressed? It needs to be put in a UV bottle. It needs to be sniffed by a monkey's butt. Like, what are all these specific high polyphenol versus low polyphenol, which we saw in the other study really did nothing? Like, where are you getting the evidence for this? Don't even get me started on the claim about weight loss, specifically adding olive oil to an existing diet. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, where are we getting this stuff? I urge you to research this yourself. This is how I did it myself. Downloading the article via PubMed, putting in a ChatGPT, prompting it is going to give you a good bang for your buck on your time to analyze these resources. I'll end with this. I think influencers like Bryan Johnson are doing a phenomenal job for the human race by testing the limits, trying different things, giving people an overall better sense of health and wellness, and helping them change their diet, even going from a crappy diet to a Mediterranean diet, getting better sleep. You're immensely changing someone's life. In that, I give you all the credit in the world. But when it comes to things like this extra virgin olive oil and the fact that you're selling a product associated with it, and it doesn't, like, I don't see any clinical data that really shows the difference between your special olive oil versus something like just switching to a Mediterranean diet. Like, I don't see anything convincing. To sum up, my goal on this channel is to bring you fact-based, evidence-based truths. I'm not a doctor. I don't receive any funds from any sponsors on this. This is just me, an average guy, doing some research, trying to find what works and what doesn't work. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.